But first, weapons. Late one night in the suburban town of Maybrook, Pennsylvania, every kid from a single classroom disappeared at the exact same time. And that, as the opening narration tells us, is where the story starts. Here's Josh Brolin, the father of one of the missing children, confronting Julia Garner, the missing kid's teacher.
I want to talk to you.
I don't think we have anything to say to each other.
Yeah, I think you have a lot to say.
You and every other person in this city. Believe me, the message is loud and clear. I'm the problem. Got it.
You know what? I think that's the first honest thing I've heard you say. You are the problem.
What, you want to get in my face? You want to threaten me?
I'm not. Nobody's threatening you right now.
You're barking up the wrong tree,
Oh, you know
okay?
what?
Maybe it was always obvious. The Weapons trailer features imagery of a tense town hall meeting with angry parents demanding answers, snapshots of departed children, and a candlelit, flower-filled memorial outside an elementary school adorned with a sign that says, Maybrook Strong. And have I mentioned that the movie is called Weapons? If you didn't go into Zach Cregger's sophomore feature already assuming the writer-director intended an allegory of American school shootings, you almost certainly walked out considering the strong possibility. During a dream sequence in which Brolin's grieving father, Archer, a weaponizer, chases after his missing son, Matthew, a large assault rifle appears floating above one of the neighborhood houses. Cregger also introduces and underscores how bullying regularly occurs amongst this group of students. Since many studies have connected bullying to school shootings, it's reasonable to assume that he expects us to make the same connection. We like to pose deeply flawed questions here on Filmspotting, Josh, so pardon me if this one follows suit. Cregger's invoking of school shootings is A, entirely intentional and powerful, offering a meaningful added layer to unpack while unraveling the chilling mystery of Maybrook's lost children. B, entirely intentional, but also entirely hollow, and as a result, possibly even distasteful. Or C, I don't know whether it's intentional or unintentional, and I'm not convinced Cregger himself knows, but I don't care because I was having too much dreadful fun.
Boy, this is going to be an edition of How Dense is Josh? Because I'm going to take you, Adam, through the timeline of my wrestling with this very question. And I'll, get to the end right now and say, see, I loved Weapons. I think it's incredible. But I will not only allow, but give way to anyone who feels B. That was the unethical choice, right? That you posited, essentially. It's interesting. This is the week of Cinema Interruptus, and a listener came up to me just yesterday after we had screened Robert Altman's The Player, and I thought, we're going to talk a little bit about what we just saw, and she wanted to talk about Weapons. And if you want to follow this listener on Letterboxd, she's there. She posted about Weapons. Kurt Runs is her handle, CurtRuns. And she was quite distraught about what she called the ethical choices made by the filmmakers. Now, I should say we didn't end up getting into it too much. So I am not certain that she's talking specifically about the school shootings connection. It seemed to be perhaps more generally about children and the use of children in the film. So it's just an example that I want to use to put out there is anyone who does have those concerns, I think are legitimate. I mercifully have not been personally touched by what has become all too common in American society, school shootings. And if I had, I might have a totally different perspective on this. I did end up in that place where I found this to be a potent allegory, a cathartic allegory from the vantage point of a person who witnesses this from afar, but still feels an impotent rage about it. But to the denseness question, Adam, I'm telling you, I'm in that group where not only was it not walking out of the theater, it was looking over my notes and trying to piece things together where I was suddenly like, oh, that's it. Like, this is absolutely it. And maybe that moves me more towards the intentional category on the part of Cregger and his collaborators. Where I started right away, though, Adam, was with the tale of the Pied Piper. And as soon as I knew the premise going in, but as soon as we get it anew in the opening segment of Weapons, and Cregger pretty much gets it out of the way before the title, I think, even with these haunting images of the children fleeing at night, I was thinking about that legend of the Pied Piper, the rat catcher who the town refuses to pay for his services, and so he leads the town's children away, and they disappear. And I'm thinking as I'm watching, what was that legend about, and why does it persist? And read up some more when I got home, and realized that some people suggest, well, this was a way for medieval communities to deal with mass deaths of children, maybe to natural disasters, maybe to disease. And a story like that was helpful in processing it. So I thought, okay, how might Weapons, which is very much about children being lost to inexplicable evil, right? Just something that you can't rationalize, like a natural disaster. How might Weapons be working in the same way? Or is it hollow? Or is it, not really serving the purpose? Is it exploiting this? And that's when I usually go to the text. During the movie, I was thinking, is this like a Gaza situation? We've been inundated with images of starving children in Gaza. Obviously, that couldn't have been intentional. But is that a way to go with this, where there's a potent metaphor or allegory here? I thought of a couple other directions. And then, yes, you mentioned it in the setup there, Adam, this image of a gun over a house. In the moment, I didn't make the connection, but I did think about other things in the text, and you counted them off, right? This empty classroom, the memorial candles and flowers. And I'm realizing these are bitterly familiar. And I do think that this movie works as a modern Pied Piper tale. And we can't really at this point get into why I found it so cathartic in the end. There's a bonkers climax, let's just say, that is darkly funny, insanely sustained on the level of filmmaking. But also, I found myself, Adam, feeling disturbingly cathartic emotions from that, because subconsciously, I think I had been connecting it to this recurring crisis in America that fits a few things we hear Archer, the Josh Brolin character, saying. I see something that doesn't make any sense at all. And later, accusing the teacher, you're either negligent or complicit. We are both negligent and complicit as a society when it comes to sacrificing kids at the idol of firearms. And I personally found Weapons to be entirely effective as an allegory for that, even if it took me a while being dense and not usually watching movies as puzzle pieces while I'm in the moment. It took me a while to get there, but I got there. And I think I like where the movie landed, or at least where I landed with it.
We'll see where the conversation goes. If you feel like we need to get into that sustained bonkers ending, and I agree, we can certainly make some room for some spoiler talk here, and we will provide plenty of advance warning if we do decide to do that. You talk about some of these other references potentially. I don't think this movie has anything in common with the other movie I'm going to mention or the book I'm going to mention, but when you talk about losing children and how we process that, does it have to be losing children to something evil? It can just be nonsensical, unfathomable. The Sweet Hereafter, the Adam McGoyan film, the Russell Banks novel is something I thought about as I watched.
Have you been talking to Scott Tobias?
No, I haven't, actually.
Our friend, critic, and Next Picture Show host, he was at the screening I was at, and afterwards he's like, I'm going to try to sell the group on pairing it with The Sweet Hereafter, which I think you're exactly right. I think that's
great.
That
minds.
would be a brilliant, that would be a brilliant pairing. I hope they do that.
And you mention things that viewers could potentially get upset about, like the person who came up to you after Cinema Interruptus. There's even another potential aspect, and I know some people have, and that's regarding who and what, maybe what is the better way to phrase it, what the villain is. That, again, we would have to leave to some spoiler talk. In terms of my answer to the question, and I like this movie too. I don't like the movie quite as much as you do, but I do like the movie. I may be tempted to say D, all of the above, or can I go with other, in that I think it's It's maybe a bit of a red herring. You certainly can't ignore it for all the reasons I outlined and you discussed. I don't necessarily think that Cregger is trying to make an overt political statement, nor do I think he's saying something particularly profound about how we as a country or society process collective trauma. And if you were inclined, I'll go back to this notion of maybe getting a little bit upset about the film. If you were inclined to be annoyed that the movie is exploiting these tragedies, another strike against it could be, this just occurred to me today as I was prepping for this conversation, Josh, the narrator tells us this little girl's voice. We never find out exactly who she is, as far as I know, right? But we have this girl's voice narrating the story at the beginning and comes back at the end. And she tells us that the powers that be in the town are going to cover up what really happened to the kids.
I have unresolved questions about the narrator and the logic behind that. I don't think that's a strength of the film and even really necessary. But yeah.
I bring that up only because now Cregger's potentially harnessing the language of conspiracy theories, which I don't know that we necessarily want to bring up when it comes to conversations about tragedies involving school shootings. But for me, I suppose it speaks to the challenge and the limitations of these types of allegorical interpretations. And I've maybe talked about this a little bit before. We've talked about Mickey 17 this year. We've talked about Tarkovsky during our Tarkovsky marathon. So there's been a lot of allegorical talk, but it doesn't necessarily expand my understanding or appreciation of a work to read what happens in a movie as representative of something else. I'm more interested in what the text itself is giving me or not giving me. And what I grasped onto here, and I don't mean grasped onto to try to decipher some deeper meaning. I mean just keeping me engaged in the story and feeling like you've got a filmmaker actually wrestling with something, maybe even something personal, and not just trying to usher us forward toward a bloody resolution. Within this Pulp Fiction-esque or Magnolia-esque nonlinear structure that we have, and that is what we have. We have chapters divided by characters, character names, and it overlaps. We get repeating moments from different points of view, different perspectives of these individual characters. It's not just that each one of them, Josh, each one of these characters is dealing with individual pain and trying to forge ahead. There are lots of movies about characters who are suffering. Here we have very lonely, isolated, hurt characters who consistently, and I would say arguably always unintentionally, hurt other people. Not only are none of them bad, we're usually sympathetic to their circumstances. We understand, but their pain leads to choices and a spiraling that causes other pain. I'll give you just two examples. The first two characters we meet, Justine, the teacher, Julia Garner's character. She is certainly a victim here. She is not someone to blame for anything that has happened. She's not to blame for this tragedy, despite how some people feel or think, have to believe. They're clinging to this notion that she must be to blame because they need someone to blame. She's not a witch, but she chooses to self-medicate excessively with alcohol. It's an issue that we learned she had before this tragedy. And selfishly, again, understandably, but selfishly, she brings another character down with her. And that character makes their own choices. I'm not discounting that, but it's a cycle. And what do his choices lead to? Another person's unintended pain and disappointment. Think about, Josh, all that ensues in this film. All the dominoes that fall that you can trace back to Justine at the bar. And of course, before that, the tragedy. But Justine at the bar insisting, just have one drink with me, please.
Yeah, a real drink.
Yeah. And then we go to Archer. The pain of losing his son not only causes him to lash out at Justine, amplifying her pain, which leads to her going to the bar and meeting with that person and wanting to have just one real drink. But Cregger shows us one interaction with Archer's wife. Her saying goodbye to go to work. He's sleeping. He's waking up in his son's bed. It's clear from that one terse interaction that their marriage is completely on the ropes since Matthew's disappearance. Rather than turning to each other, rather than relying on each other, Archer, anyway, has completely turned inward. He is understandably here again, but selfishly, let the pain completely consume him. And he's completely detached from his marriage. And I think there's a corollary with every other main character, certainly every other character who gets to chapter, save one. And I won't get into that because of spoilers. And it even connects back to the character who we shall not speak about, because then we're really getting into spoilers, that villain character as I'm identifying them. But that connection too, Josh, even confirms further for me that Cregger explores the way pain consumes and controls us, how it can be weaponized, and the collateral damage it causes.
I think you're onto something that I was trying to piece together, and this is helpful in that vein, about the notion of parasites in a way and feeding off others. And these characters
it's a motif
aren't
that
really
recurs.
Yeah, it's a motif. There are characters watching a nature documentary and we see a good 30 seconds of it, and it's about a form of parasites. And it's not that the characters you're describing are necessarily meaning to feed off others, but I like how you're talking about the transferring of pain, and I think that fits. The structure I think is very intricate and smart and clever and effective. I want to return to it, but first I want to say that I like what you were talking about in terms of appreciating the experience that you're given, not necessarily putting all your eggs in the basket of the allegory. And I wanted to return to that because I'm not, despite what I said at the top, I'm not as enthusiastic about weapons because it does function for me as an allegory for school shootings. I mostly appreciated this as an expertly constructed, terrifying, like heart-thumping horror movie. And then if I can afterwards, when I'm going home, trying to catch my breath, and I missed my stop on the train, can I point out, because I was so discombobulated by this movie, I went one stop too far. If after that great experience, I can then have that, oh, but it could also mean this, then it's a bonus. So just wanted to kind of like agree with you and kind of prioritizing that.
And real quick, my version of that was seeing it late afternoon and coming home and sitting at dinner. And I was being a bad husband and father, where Sarah looked across the table at one point and said, "You seem to have something on your mind." And I had to be honest and say, I just kind of can't shake the movie I just saw.
I have a few things on my mind.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm never going into the basement again.
Right.
Actually, that's
I
where
already
we are
hate
right now.
basements.
You're there right now, I believe.
Yeah.
So we were, the structure. I wanted to ask you. So a question I had in my notes, and I think this might have already come up on the Filmspotting family Discord, a listener who had seen the movie. I think that's where I saw it. They were talking about the chapters and what that might have added. And I did actually have that in my note. Did the structure add anything? And where I landed after thinking about it some more, yes, the things you talked about, absolutely, allowing us to make these connections. I think what it does, it also kind of excruciatingly but inventively doles out the pieces of this increasingly terrifying puzzle. I think it's effective that way. But also, I do think that it allows us to get a fuller sense of this traumatized community. I found myself forming more intimate connections with each character and learning about their foibles, to your point, in a way I probably would not have if this was all focused on Justine, say, or all focused on Archer. Those others would have been more supporting characters. And by making everyone a supporting character, I felt like I knew this place, this town, better than I would have otherwise. And so I appreciated that. And I also think, it allows the actors to really dig in and get not scenes, not even just one scene where they get to be the main focus, but an entire section. And I think Brolin is excellent, and Garner is incredible as this exasperated basket case. You described her well. She is not the villain, but boy, she's making almost every wrong choice you could, given the situation she's in. And I think Garner is incredible in the role.
Yeah, she's very good because she is making all those wrong choices, but we see her as flawed. We see her as human. And I think we understand, at least I understood, that she was thinking about her students, that she was making
Yes.
choices that weren't, here again, she wasn't making choices that were driven by selfishness, but her pain was leading her to make what often were very bad decisions. I was at first a little bit confounded by the structure, Josh, because I was so interested in those first two characters, and especially Justine, especially Garner and her performance too. And once we started going from Justine to Archer and then to Paul, which is the Alden Ehrenreich character, who's
also great, by the way.
He's very good. But once I went from him, and then I think we go from him maybe to James, who is a character we do meet earlier. Again, all these stories overlap, and he's someone who is asking for money, and he's looking for a fix. There may be another character in between, but we do meet James at one point. And the point here is, regardless of what order they go in, I started feeling like, okay, you're right. He is being very clever about how he's doling out information, and I almost felt like Cregger was being too clever. You're being a little too deliberate. You're being a little bit too precocious about how you're doling out the information. And maybe to the movie's credit, Josh, I was so invested in where the story was going that I wanted to get some of the resolution a little quicker, and I felt like he was going down some paths that were distractions. But I want to go back to why I really felt that way, and why I felt like some of those storylines were kind of, at first, I felt like it was the movie spinning its wheels a little bit. I started to feel, sitting in my seat, I started to feel myself become a little disengaged from the story. And as I said, it really was because I was so tied to those characters, Justine and Archer. And I think that that's because the movie fundamentally is about them. It understands that
That's fair.
At the core of this film, 17 kids disappear all from one teacher's classroom, and he's the one who says it. Why only hers? For different reasons, this is what she's also trying to learn, what she's trying to understand. So they're both trying to understand this central mystery. And we try not to play screenwriter here and rewrite the movie, but there's a part of me that wonders if this movie would be just as effective, if not more effective, if you sort of played the movie straight and let Justine be the main character, let Archer be a co-lead or a supporting character, and have their storylines intersect. But what we would miss in that, Josh, and how I ultimately came around, is at some point when we got into those chapters, what clicked for me is what I articulated earlier. What clicked for me was, oh, there's a reason why we're meeting all these characters. And the through line is the pain and the transference of pain. Yes, it's also cleverly giving us new information, and we're starting to put together the pieces of what's really happening here, but it's the transference of pain. And that for me then made me understand what Cregger, I thought, was really up to, and it justified it for me. Now, I'll also add quickly, I saw this today because it popped up in my feed. Letterboxd published it. He really is just a huge fan of Magnolia. And I swear to you, the first time Alden Ehrenreich popped up on screen, I sat there as he walked into that bar, and I cannot totally explain it, but I sat there and stared at him on screen and went, mustache, huh? Mustache. Like, why? And he's a police officer, and he's got that mustache. The first time we see him, he's in his uniform, and he's got a mustache. And I kind of just sat there. There was something about it. I'm not even saying I responded negatively to it, but there was something that just made me dwell on it. And then I read today that was just Cregger going, I just love the character John C. Reilly plays in Magnolia. So I had Alden Ehrenreich have a mustache like the cop in Magnolia.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, there you go. We
Sure.
we have to find all kind of inspiration, all kinds of places.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely Magnolia touchstone. You can see that throughout this movie. And to your point about, once you connected with the through line of pain for all the characters, that's tied to what I was saying about, then it became a portrait of communal pain. For me, the structure allowed it to be a community's pain that we're holding. And the pacing, I never flagged because, again, I don't remember where we get these set pieces. And and I'm going to dance around this for spoilers, but there is a gas station incident, which the way that is staged is the opposite of a jump scare. And so, Adam, I think my heart leapt when I realized what was happening, and then it like tried to literally crawl out of my throat.
Yeah,
it was
that's
like
the
this
scene we cut off.
sensation.
Right before that happened, you heard the audio. Yeah,
It was this sensation I don't know that I've had since maybe I was a kid watching The Shining, too young. And then there is another moment which I think occurs earlier that I will not describe in detail as well. It is, I'll just say, Justine is asleep in her car, and particularly vulnerable.
I know where you're going.
And the way Cregger uses delicate movement of the camera, very specific blocking, and then sound design to communicate what could be about to happen. It's a single take, I can say that. And it's just an unbearable experience of dread. And connected to it, the mileage they get in this movie out of a suburban home's front door opening to a blackness. I don't know how they managed that, but it is unlike anything else I think I've seen. The cinematographer Larkin Siepel here, who worked on Everything Everywhere All at Once, actually, the blackness when that door opens is underworldly. I don't know how you describe it, but it's terrifying. Just a shot of that every time you see it, because it's a motif I never got used to. So the overall point is there are enough brilliantly crafted horror set pieces in this for me to just hook me and keep me, allowing me to catch my breath when we do then go follow another character for a little while also being fearful of what in some cases I know is coming that they don't, that a character might not, which brings us back to Cregger's, earlier movie Barbarian, which I liked well enough, but it did cleverly play with narrative perspective. Barbarian is, famously a good way into the movie cuts off from the people we've been watching and introduces someone entirely new, and then has that person in the situation we'd been watching. So we know more information there, and he's doing something similar here. I think it's more effective here, playing with the idea of narrative perspective.
Well, I wouldn't know because I tried to do my homework and finally catch up with Barbarian.
Oh boy.
The other night.
You had to bail.
And to Cregger's credit as a filmmaker, when it comes to building dread, because at this point, there had been no gore, zero monsters on screen. Here I was, Josh, thinking I was finally a big boy. At middle age, I could handle horror. Finally, right?
Yeah.
I've had this string of horror movies that I've enjoyed for the most part, or I've enjoyed talking about here on the show. And I pretty much remember the exact moment. It was about 40 minutes in. I think I can say it's when the main character goes to the basement the second time.
Another basement.
I said, another basement. I said, you know what? I'm out. The dread, the feeling, the anticipation of dread was so overwhelming. I just said, I can't do it. I don't want to know what's coming. Wow. I'm bailing on this film, and I will just go in to Weapons without having the benefit of seeing this film. And I don't know that I ever will see it. I mentioned Tarkovsky earlier, and you mentioned The Door. We go back to the Tarkovsky marathon. All the films and all the filmmakers that he references, Cregger, including on that Letterboxd article, he doesn't mention Tarkovsky, but the significance of doorways, remember, is something we we keyed in on, and it comes up again and again here. It's not just that door, and it happens even in Barbarian in the first 40 minutes that I saw.
Yeah.
In Tarkovsky, sometimes it's just the archway itself. It's the entryway that is like this threshold this powerful threshold that becomes an entryway. It becomes this powerful force almost. He is obsessed with doors and the creepiness of a door opening slowly, beckoning you to enter, the unseen force that's kind of ushering you in, and even if it's just opening on its own. And the way he also repeatedly mounts the camera on like Archer's truck door.
Yeah,
so it's
yeah.
even the truck door. So when it shuts, you get that very sudden jarring effect. And you mentioned the shot. You mentioned both the scene in the car with Justine and the gas station that we heard a little bit of, the gas station confrontation. And in both those cases, what he does so well there, because there are so many other examples where he's lifting moments from The Shining, where he's using the steady cam to great effect, and he's using those more jarring effects, and he loves movement. What I love about both of those scenes, it's Julia Garner first alerting us with her eyes that something is coming. And that's what clues us in and gets us a little nervous first, gets us anxious first. And then the camera just kind of swings a little bit before it even shows us what's coming towards us. And then in that shot in the car, it is a still camera that is just focused on her in the driver's seat of her car, and it's all what's happening off camera.
Yeah.
That's what's killing us as viewers,
Yes.
is the
Yes.
waiting. The waiting and the not knowing what is happening and what could be about
could.
to happen. So
Yes.
he understands how to use that space within the frame, but also the space outside of the frame to build that dread. And then even you think about the poster and the imagery that comes back, that recurs in this film again and again, the running shots of the children. It does become clearer what that is meant to evoke. To me, it really does feel like a jet plane, where their arms are spread back like wings.
Yeah.
And obviously, for them all to be running to the same place at the same time, they must be, here again, that idea of control. They must be lacking some control. But there's also this sense, Josh, that while some force must be driving them, they also look like kids who are using their imagination, and that they are
Yes.
totally free in the moment. And so that juxtaposition, that contradiction is so striking.
And it's, you sometimes horror can be reduced to one image like this. And then if the movie backs it up, it will go down indelibly as a landmark horror image. And I think that is going to be the case with this shot of the kids running. I mean, it's instrumental to the marketing campaign, but it's richer than that when you actually see the film. And I do like how he uses it sparingly. As I said, we get this before the title of the movie, and we don't really return to it. Let's say this, we don't return to it for the majority of the film otherwise, save for one little reference that is effective. But it's not like he's using it too much, to my mind, basically. And I think it's just going to be a marker. It's going to be like the blood coming out of the elevator in The Shining. It's going to be like Heather's face looking in the camera in Blair Witch. I think the silhouette of a kid running down a dark suburban street is going to 10 to 20 years from now have that cultural cachet and impact. And I think it earns it. I think it earns it. Now, I don't think Weapons is a perfect film. And I want to ask you something that's somewhat related to your Barbarian experience, which I loved hearing about. The part you didn't get to, for me, the ending of Barbarian is kind of what lost me, where Cregger did start really amping up the insanity. I almost felt like the movie had abandoned, not only given a new perspective to what came before, but abandon it in trying to trick us and be clever. I don't think that happens in Weapons, but I do think while I found the ending, particularly the climax, cathartic, I do think there are, and this is a question for you because it goes to like horror logic. I do think there are some, we're going to have to dance around this, some logic plot holes that were not big enough to throw me off. But let's just say, to totally buy in on Weapons, you have to understand that this is the most incompetent police force in the history of the world. Is
Maybe.
that fair? And
Maybe.
And if
Yeah,
you
I see
agree,
where you're going.
did that throw you
Yeah.
off with once we understand what's really going on here, and the movie
Yeah.
does tell us, it puts all its cards on the table
Sure.
quite clearly.
Sure.
And then your mind starts thinking, okay, if this is what happened, how did it actually go down? And we see some of that. But then your mind starts saying, like, I was anticipating, like, they're going to have to answer this big question I have. And the answer was, you know, like, these guys needed a few more years of training, I think.
Okay. You know, what I would point out, Josh, is the thing that undoes the film even more is this is a movie that does, for the most part, play by the rules. It plays by real world rules, and it acknowledges that this is a world that has, as our world does, ring cameras that captures neighborhood activity. And I will say, if only there was one ring camera placed in one particular area, then there also wouldn't be an entire movie. So there are ways that we could certainly undercut it, but for the most part, I really respect that Cregger tries to play by rules in ways that I don't think a lot of horror movies try to. And I'm game for getting into some spoiler talk if you want to save that, and maybe at the very end of the podcast we can do that. I think in terms of just kind of putting a bow on this conversation, I am interested. I find it interesting to hear that you weren't necessarily totally on board with the ending of the film, because I wasn't either. And it does get, the way I would describe it is, it does get openly silly. There is, I think, and my audience, I didn't see it with a huge crowd, but the crowd laughed. I don't think there's any response you can have to what happens at the end of this film but to laugh. It seems decidedly intentional on the filmmaker's part. And
Yeah.
I do have tremendous respect for Cregger for going there. And it requires, I think, great confidence as a filmmaker to do it when you have a film that otherwise is so gory and so portentous and is so dread-filled. My questions would be, based on everything that came before, should there be real, and you mentioned this, Josh, should there be real emotional catharsis at the end? And then did you have it, or did the silliness undercut that? And my answers are yes, there should be, and no, not really. I didn't really have it, and the silliness is part of what undercut it. I walked out of this movie more with kind of a grin on my face, thinking, boy, Cregger's really is such a cheeky filmmaker. So it didn't fully deliver on the promise of its provocative premise for me.
Yeah, to be clear, I was all in on the climax, the actual ending. What I was referring to is once we start seeing the logistics of the answer to the mystery.
Okay, so
that's where I was.
love the silliness.
The
more
mean,
absurd, the
Adam,
better.
it was. Yeah. I was like, no, this isn't going to happen, is it?
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, it's happening.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's still happening, and it's happening like that, and it's like, it's almost like they knew they had a good joke, and then I mean, it is played as a comedy bit, because it's now let's up the ante here. Now what if it happens here? Now here, and the audio that goes with it.
Yes.
I can't talk in detail here about why it works for me, but I will say, Adam, my intellectual response gave way to the catharsis. Okay. And again, this was before I had made the allegorical connection to school shootings.
Sure.
So it was like a subliminal, subconscious, like, I didn't know why I was feeling so cathartic about this crazy climax, because every bone in my body was probably telling me I should not be enjoying this. I should not be disturbed, laughing. Why am I finding this like yes, and I think for a couple of reasons: the brilliance of the filmmaking, and deep down, there was something this movie was nagging at me about, that I needed a cathartic experience. So I really do believe that's what I had.
And
but
I think
I completely understand if you were taken out by it, because it is a big, big swing.
And I think the distinction in what I'm hearing, or what I think I'm hearing from you, is you're speaking about catharsis more in the sense of the movie itself delivering a sense of catharsis. And I'm thinking very specifically in terms of the characters. I'm thinking about where Justine is at, where Archer is at. I'm thinking about where another character or characters are at that I don't want to get into.
Yeah.
That's the catharsis I need the movie to deliver, and I think the movie tries to deliver it. It's not that it's not there, but I didn't feel it on the level that I thought I might based on everything that came before.
Yeah, the final moments, and this is related back to my qualms about the voiceover narration that bookends this. And the final moments, I maybe felt closer to that when we do get that narration again. And it, again, opens some questions. I think maybe, I don't know how you feel, I feel like we've covered a lot of good stuff, and maybe we hold spoilers for, like, if we get listener feedback, emails, and you know, that might be a chance to dig into some of the particulars. But I do want to say real quickly, because we praised the performances overall, Austin Abrams, who plays James, who's the young guy who's looking for a fix, and really I think anchors a significantly comic section of the movie. I was like, this guy is amazing. He is fantastic. And then I was looking at the credits, and you saw Wolves, right? The Clooney Brad Pitt thing. Remember that grungy goofball, the third wheel, who hangs around with them? He's sort of like,
and he had that same sort of effortless kind of
effortless
goofiness.
Austin Abrams,
you're right.
Just like so good here too.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm glad you looked that up. Weapons is currently playing in wide release. If you've seen it and you agree or disagree, or you have any other thoughts you'd like to share, we would love to hear from you. Feedback@filmspotting.net.